It never starts with chaos. It starts with a pattern, one we've seen before. The same signals that appeared before 1929 and again before 2008 are flashing together right now, not by accident, but in the exact rhythm the hidden cycle predicted. If history is right, the next move isn't years away. It's already beginning. Picture this. It's September 2025. A young family in suburban Phoenix sits at their kitchen table, surrounded by bills they can no longer pay. The father, a construction worker, lost his job 3 months ago when housing projects froze. The mother, a teacher, watches her pension evaporate as municipal bonds collapse. Their savings account, once their safety net, now buys half what it did a year ago. Down the street, a retiree stares at his investment portfolio, watching decades of careful planning dissolve in real time. This isn't fiction. This is the opening scene of what some analysts describe as a highly concerning economic convergence not seen in decades. Welcome to Empire Economics, where history and money collide. And today, we're examining something that should terrify and fascinate you in equal measure. Multiple economic forecasters are now assigning unprecedented probability to a downturn that some forecasts suggest could be more severe than previous major recessions. JP Morgan puts the odds at 40% by the end of 2025. Nouriel Roubini, the economist who predicted the 2008 crisis, sees an 80% chance. But most alarming of all, Apollo's Torsten Slok assigns a staggering 90% probability to recession by 2025. These aren't fringe voices shouting from the wilderness. These are the institutions that move trillions of dollars daily. They're seeing something in the data that should make every person on Earth pay attention. Because what's building isn't just another downturn. It's a perfect storm of vulnerabilities that have been decades in the making. To understand why this crash could hit harder than anything we've seen, we need to grasp the sheer scale of what we're dealing with. The global economy today operates on a foundation of debt that makes 1929 look quaint and 2008 appear manageable. We're carrying a collective burden of $251 trillion in total debt. Let that number sink in for a moment. That's more than 3 times the entire global economy. It's as if every person, company, and government on Earth borrowed against their future earnings not once, not twice, but 3 times over. America alone now carries $38 trillion in national debt, representing 125% of GDP. But here's what makes this particularly dangerous. Over the past 5 years, the cost of servicing this debt has nearly tripled. By 2035, interest payments alone are projected to reach $1.8 trillion annually. That's more than the entire federal budget spent on everything except Social Security and Medicare. The system is beginning to show signs of significant strain. The warning signs are flashing red across every major indicator economists use to predict crashes. The yield curve, which has successfully predicted every recession since 1960, with only one false positive, has been inverted longer than any time in modern history. This isn't just a statistical oddity, it's a signal analysts have been monitoring closely for an unusually long time. But what happened next would change everything we thought we knew about economic resilience. Corporate America, instead of using the cheap money from the past 15 years to invest in productive capacity, chose a different path. Since 2008, companies issued $12.9 trillion more in bonds than historical trends would predict. But here's the kicker. Corporate investment during that same period was $8.4 trillion lower than expected. Where did all that borrowed money go? Share buybacks, executive bonuses, and financial engineering that created the illusion of growth without the substance. The housing market tells an even more disturbing story. Prices have reached record levels, while the inventory of unsold new homes has climbed to levels not seen since 2009. Remember what happened after 2009? the foreclosure wave that caused widespread vacancies in many communities. Families who thought their homes were their security discovered that security built on debt is no security at all. Meanwhile, household debt has exploded to $18.39 trillion, with credit card debt alone exceeding $1.2 trillion. The average American family is more leveraged today than they were on the eve of the 2008 financial crisis. They're borrowing to maintain a standard of living that their wages can no longer support, creating a fragile financial position that becomes sensitive to even small shifts in the economy. The labour market, often considered the economy's strongest pillar, is beginning to crack. Unemployment claims have crept from 220,000 per week in mid-2024 to 285,000 recently. That might seem like a small increase, but in economics, small changes often signal massive shifts. It's like watching the first pebbles fall before an avalanche. What makes this moment uniquely dangerous is the convergence of policy uncertainty with structural weakness. The new administration has signaled massive government workforce reductions, potentially laying off up to 1 million federal employees. This would represent the largest single layoff event in American history, occurring precisely when the private sector shows signs of strain. Historically, government employment serves as an economic stabilizer during downturns. Removing that stabilizer while the economy wobbles is like taking the brakes off a car rolling downhill. Trade policy adds another layer of volatility. Aggressive tariff implementations could trigger retaliatory measures from trading partners, potentially sparking a level of trade tension that some analysts compare to earlier periods of economic strain. The financial system itself has evolved in ways that amplify rather than absorb shocks. Private credit markets, largely unregulated and poorly understood, now move enormous sums of capital with minimal oversight. It's as if we've built a financial system with all the complexity of 2008, but with even less transparency and control. Stock market valuations have reached levels that parallel the dot-com bubble. The S&P 500 Shiller CAPE ratio sits at its second highest level in history. Corporate bond spreads remain near all-time lows, suggesting investors are still not adequately pricing risk. It's the financial equivalent of driving at highway speeds while looking in the rearview mirror. Global interconnectedness means that when one major economy sneezes, the rest of the world catches pneumonia. Over 3 billion people now live in countries where government interest payments exceed spending on education or health. When those governments face funding crises, the human cost spreads far beyond balance sheets and into classrooms and hospitals. But perhaps most concerning of all is the psychological dimension. Markets run on confidence, and confidence is a fragile thing. When confidence erodes, markets often react sharply, something history has shown repeatedly. We've seen this pattern before, in 1929, in 2008, and in countless smaller crises throughout history. The difference between surviving a crash and being destroyed by one often comes down to understanding a single principle. Those who recognize the signs early don't just protect themselves. They position themselves to rebuild when others cannot. History shows us that every great collapse creates two groups of people, those who saw it coming and those who trusted that someone else was watching the road. What we're witnessing today isn't just economic turbulence. It's the unwinding of the most complex financial experiment in human history. For the past 15 years, central banks have pumped over $20 trillion into global markets through quantitative easing. They've kept interest rates at historic lows, creating an environment where risk became almost free. But free risk is an illusion. The bill always comes due. The Federal Reserve now faces an impossible choice. Keep rates low and watch inflation devour the purchasing power of ordinary families, or raise them and trigger the very crash they've been trying to prevent. It's like trying to land a plane while the engines are failing and the runway is shrinking. Every option leads to turbulence. European banks carry exposure to sovereign debt that makes 2008 look manageable. Deutsche Bank alone holds derivative positions worth $47 trillion, roughly half the size of global GDP. When Lehman Brothers collapsed in 2008, its failure nearly brought down the entire financial system. Lehman's balance sheet was $600 billion. We're now dealing with institutions that are exponentially larger and more interconnected. China presents perhaps the greatest wild card of all. Their property sector, which represents roughly 30% of their economy, is experiencing the largest real estate contraction in its modern history. Major developers have defaulted on hundreds of billions in debt. Ghost cities that once symbolized endless growth now stand as monuments to misallocated capital. When China's economy stumbles, the ripple effects reach every corner of the globe. But here's what makes this moment unprecedented. Unlike 1929 or 2008, the typical policy tools may be more limited than in past downturns. Central banks have already fired their biggest ammunition. Interest rates can't go much lower. Government debt levels are already at elevated levels. The traditional tools for fighting recession have been exhausted before the recession even begins. The derivatives market has grown to over $600 trillion, 10 times the size of global GDP. These financial instruments, designed to spread risk, have instead created a web of interconnected obligations that no single institution fully understands. It's as if the global financial system has become a massive Jenga tower, where stressing one component can have wide-reaching ripple effects. Pension funds across America are already underwater. The average state pension system is funded at only 68% of its obligations. When markets crash, these shortfalls become impossible to ignore. Teachers, firefighters, and public servants who spent decades believing their retirements were secure may face unexpected shortfalls. The cryptocurrency boom has added another layer of complexity. Digital assets worth over $2 trillion exist largely outside traditional regulatory frameworks. When Bitcoin crashes, it doesn't just affect tech enthusiasts. It impacts pension funds, insurance companies, and banks that have integrated crypto into their portfolios. The line between traditional finance and digital assets has blurred beyond recognition. The patterns are clear, the vulnerabilities exposed, the mathematics undeniable. Whether 2025 brings gentle correction or rapid economic adjustment, history teaches us that knowledge is the ultimate shield against uncertainty. Understanding these forces doesn't guarantee safety, but ignorance guarantees vulnerability. This content is for educational purposes only and does not constitute financial, legal, or investment advice. If you enjoy learning how history and money intertwine, subscribe to Empire Economics for more untold stories.